profiting from it or getting off on it or whatever.
Okay, that's why I avoid all the social media stuff. It's sort of a system, disincentives, because you're trying to get noticed.
Well,
What does
you get paid to post stuff.
like, what's not noticeable? Oh, hi, I'm having a nice day. No one's gonna
Right.
notice that.
If it bleeds, it leads, or whatever, something like that.
That's same concept. Oh, Rabbi,
Yeah.
have you been posting the recent recordings of this version of the Kabbalah Cafe class?
Yes. Yes, I have.
Is that on your SoundClouds?
So we have a new SoundCloud account.
Right. Okay,
So last week's class, I actually have not uploaded, but up until last week, I have everything up. It's called Torah Unraveled. That's the new podcast.
Okay.
That's the new podcast. And then, of course, the address is soundcloud.com/the Torah Center ATL.
The first time I saw you, you were hosting the event for the survivor.
Yes.
How can I find that lecture? My friend was supposed to meet me there and she didn't show up and I was so worried she was in an accident. As it turns out she was late, running late.
Got it. Right.
But I was so worried about her that I was not as good as.
Was that Eva Schloss? Anne Frank's stepsister? Or no, that was Martha Cohen? Yeah, so she was at the Buckhead Theater, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that was Martha Cohen. So if you send me an email, I'll send you that recording and or video if we have the video. I don't remember what we have on that, but I'll find it and I'll send it to you. By the way, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I'm working right now on an incredible event with I don't know exactly how old he is, maybe 94, maybe 96, maybe somewhere in between there, survivor who lives in Florida, and he created the Holocaust Survivors Band. And he has a band and he speaks, he tells a story. And I just spoke to him last week about him coming out in about a month. I don't know. I know. I don't think I think he's on the drums. And yeah, it's pretty remarkable. Yes. Yes. I did not hear him, but I am familiar with the story and I would love to hear him. When was that? Was that this year? No, it's been a few years. Yeah, I don't think I was actually looking to, he's no longer doing speaking engagement. He's no longer traveling to do speaking engagements. But I spoke to, his name is Saul, the one that I spoke to, Saul Dreyer. I spoke to him on Thursday, just a few days ago, and he is so active and energetic. It's incredible. And he's really looking forward to coming to Atlanta. So that should be amazing. All right, let's welcome our online crew, Mariana, Joy, Andrea, David, Lynn, and Danielle. Great. Welcome. It's good to have you guys here. And of course, our in-person crew and our deluxe breakfast. Tobo, what do you say about this breakfast? Right?
Best breakfast in the world that I've ever had.
It's unbelievable. It's like the best hot breakfast in Atlanta, right here. Gourmet, deluxe. It's incredible. 3 types of potatoes and eggs and who even knows, yogurt bars and coffee and tea stations. It's lavish. I'm actually going to post on social media at some point in the next day or so, a little bit of a walkthrough on the buffet, just so y'all can see what's going on over here and join us if you can. All right, I think we're ready to start. This is going to be a lot of fun today and a very special edition of the class, as you will find out as the class goes on. All right, so let's formally begin. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Kabbalah Cafe. This is our, how do we refer to this? This is our deep dive into all things Kabbalah to get the week started. Yeah, is that a run-on sentence? Is that enough of a run-on sentence? Perfect. All right, no better way to get the week started than with this lavish breakfast and Kabbalah. I used to say the tagline of my Sunday morning classes was coffee in your cup, right? And Kabbalah in your cup. That was the tagline. However, nowadays, It's way more than coffee. It's coffee and it's bagels and it's hash browns and it's eggs and it's yogurt bar and Weisnish. But either way, it's great to be here with you to study some Kabbalah. Today's topic is radical creativity, which is a favorite topic of mine and something that we've explored and touched on in different ways and different iterations previously. But we have a lot to talk about. This morning. Good morning, Boker Tov. So the topic is radical creativity, and the first thing we need to define is what is creativity. We touched on this a little bit last week. When it comes to the Sefirot, when it comes to the divine energies. Good morning, Norm. When it comes to divine energy, we're talking about creativity. As a man who knows a thing or two about creativity, I feel like it's good to have you in on the convo.
Talking to me?
I'm talking to you, 100%. You are the master of creativity.
Oh.
So when it comes to creativity and understood through a Kabbalistic lens, the first thing we need to do is reference our Sefirot chart. So this is something that's a favorite of mine, and let's pass these around. If you've studied with me for a little while, you've seen these, no doubt. Let me do more than one at a time. That's going to be very inefficient. Thank you very much. Pass these around. You got it. Perfect. Keep it down there in case we get some more folks. Oh, it does not slide. Look at that friction. Who would have thought? Yeah, that could have, and it would have worked if not for those. What was the Scooby-Doo line? If not for those meddling kids. Exactly. Not for those meddling kids. Ray, it's great to see you. Welcome. Okay, so we're looking at this chart of Sefirot. I'm going to put it up on the Zoom so that you guys can see this as well. And we are going to do a deep dive. Now, this mystical chart indicates the 10 Sefirot. Just to do a very, very quick recap, these are 10 divine energies with which, according to Kabbalah, God creates the world. In other words, God employs these 10 energies to create the world. They are the toolbox, the divine toolbox by which God creates. Now, God could create without these energies. Certainly, God could just poof and it would be, but God creates in a way that's somewhat logical so that we can understand the process of creation and thus have a relationship with God. If everything was completely out of nowhere without any rhyme or reason, i.e. any logical rationale or explanation or toolkit, then it would be way beyond our rationale. So think about channel your inner Bob Ross, right? Who's Bob Ross? You guys know Bob Ross, the painter? On PBS, he used to paint, right? He used to teach you how to paint a thing. I have, 1 second, let me just check. Yep, I have my Bob Ross socks on. And if anybody wants to fact check me, you can after the class. This is actually legit. I feel like Matt, I want to show you at least a fact check. Do I have Bob Ross socks? Okay, thank you. Anyway, so my Bob Ross socks are kind of inclining me, if that's a word, to speak about Bob Ross. He paints with paint. I know that's the most obvious thing I probably ever said, but if you want to paint, you need paint and you need different colors in your palette. So you're holding a little, right? You hold one of those things. Yeah. It's called a palette. Where you hold the thing and you got little blobs of paint and that's it. You go to town on the old canvas. Good morning.
Sorry.
You're good. You're good. How could you be sorry about such a breakfast? Look at this breakfast. And by the way, we should thank Jeff for the eggs. It's like the Catskills, right? It's like the homework, just with better entertainment, better jokes. Kidding. The Borscht Belt here all week. Tip your waiters and waitresses. Try the veal. Listen, I know. Listen, it's. I'm Jeff. I'll tell you this. With my hair, you'll get used to it. It grows on you. Oh, I'm sorry. It grows on me. Yes. Huh? Yeah. Not from here. Completely. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, see, next step is going to be table service.
We give it to some people, special people.
It would be CBT. They have to go in there.
That's right.
I don't know. Sorry about this. All right. So back to the story. So you have Bob Ross, who's the artist, and he has the palette, and he has the colors, he has the paint, and he's using the paint to create a beautiful artwork. And the way it works is that if you have more colors of paint, you can paint, you have a little bit more flexibility. I know you can mix colors together. I know, maybe you don't need that many colors as I think. But nonetheless, this is the divine palette right here. God creates, God projects these 10 energies and then utilizes the 10 energies to create the world. What are the 10 energies? Chachma, Bina, Dat, right, left, center, Chesed, Gevura, Teferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and finally Malchut. These 10 energies don't just exist on a cosmic or a macro level, in the macrocosm of existence, but they also exist within the microcosm of existence, i.e. within the human soul. This is what we are going to focus on today, these energies as they exist within the human being, within the human soul, because, as we know, in Genesis 1, God created man in his image. Right? God created us, mankind, right? Human beings in the divine image. And everyone wants to know, what does that mean? What does that look like? What does it mean that we're created in the divine image? Does God look like us? Do we look like God? Right? What is, does God have a haircut? Does he not have a hair? Like what is it? No. What it means that we're created in the divine image, that means that just like God projects these 10 energies, we have these same 10 energies within us, and they drive our soul. What we're going to focus on today are the top two, Chachma and Bina. These are personally of the 10 energies. These are two of my top 10. That's a joke. But only 10. But these are favorite topics within Kabbalah and Hasidic philosophy. Chachma translated here as wisdom, and Bina translated here as understanding. But as we'll soon see, and as we've discussed many, many times, these translations do not do justice to these two energies in any way, shape, or form. Chachma is not just wisdom; it is creativity. Bina is not just understanding, it is more precisely comprehension. So we have creativity and we have comprehension. So let's explore this. Last week, I mentioned that in order to know, or in order to be aware of more than you currently know, your mind has to be open to that information. So if your brain, I don't mean this literally, but conceptually, if your mind is squeezed in the sense that you're trying to figure out something and working on a problem using what you know and using your experience, you're probably going to be stuck inside of your own head and not be open to some sort of radical perspective or other area of wisdom that's outside of your wheelhouse. So yeah.
Einstein said, knowledge is confining. We knew we couldn't fly, so nobody tried.
That's powerful. What Norma's saying is Einstein says that knowledge is confining, right? We knew we couldn't fly, right? We knew that with certainty, so we couldn't. It took someone to say, maybe we can. Who says what we know is correct, right? The problem is that we think we know, or we know that we know, and then we get stuck in that knowledge. That's a great way of phrasing it. It's a great way of framing it. So we think we know, we get stuck in what we know, and then we're not open to the possibilities. So it's kind of like we have this box, and we draw the box, and we're inside the box, and we're operating within the box, and we can't see outside the box. We can't see anything that is outside of the box of our own limited knowledge and experience. And the more we try to utilize what we already know to figure out a problem that seems to be outside of our reach, the more we try to do that, the more frustrated we'll be, because we'll realize that we're not getting anywhere. We're not truly getting anywhere outside of our own experience. So it'll be literally spinning our wheels, because we're just going to be stuck in the same space as we are. So Chachma, creativity, is the ability to let go of what we have and be open to radically new possibilities. Now, this is very important in life. It's very important in life on many different levels, to be open to what we don't know. I think if we're honest, then we know that there are things that we don't know. But the crazy thing is that we don't know what we don't know, right? I think there's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, or something along those lines, yeah? Where the less people know, the more people think they do know. There's like an inverse relationship between how much you know and how much you think you know. So like they asked you college students after an exam, how did you think you did? The kids that thought they did the best did the worst. And the conclusion is it's probably coming from the same place, right? The same reason why you think you did well is why you didn't do well. The overconfidence or the lack, just like you got that question wrong, you got those other questions wrong. Does that make sense? Right. You got the question of how did you do on the test wrong, like you got the question on the test wrong. Because you're not right. So the more you think you know, oftentimes, not always, I mean, you could actually know and know that you know, it's fine. But oftentimes, the more you think you know, the less you actually know. And there's a lack of self-awareness there. So there's what we know, there's what we don't know, there's what we think we know, there's what we know we don't know, and then there's what we don't know we don't know. Are you with me on this? Was that 5, 6?
Who we know?
We'll leave that. We'll leave that for another conversation. Who we know. So again, there's what we know. There's what we don't know. There's what we think, or what we know we know. What we know we don't know. What we don't know that we don't know. And that last category, what we don't know, what we don't know, that's the most powerful category, because we can't even fathom those areas of knowledge that we don't know, don't have experience about. That's why the greatest leaders of industry today advocate for cross-collaboration in fields and exploration. So for example, you have now in the apparel industry, right? You have the apparel industry teaming up with the hip hop industry, with music industry, with other industries, not just to sell more shoes, but to collaborate on design itself, with the understanding that take all the shoe people in the world, put them in a room, and you may just get another shoe. But you bring someone from outside the shoe industry in a room, you might just get something radically different. Still a shoe, but radically different. Because shoe people, right? Shoe people, they're thinking shoe. But other people outside that industry are thinking other things. So when you collaborate, it started, of course, I don't know if it started, but the first one that I can think of because of my age and experience, Michael Jordan with Nike, right? But Michael Jordan was selling Nike shoes, right? He wore them, be like Mike, right? That was Bo Knows, that was Bo Jackson. You had all these campaigns selling shoes because your hero, your celebrity, right? Your idol, as it were, is wearing those shoes. But now there's a different chachma behind it. Now the understanding is you can get creative ideas precisely from people outside your field. So now you mix a philosopher with a mathematician, with a musician, and you know what? Something's going to happen. Put them in a room together, put them on a project together, something wild's going to happen. Creativity happens. Creativity lies in the space outside of what we currently know. And if you can have a conversation with somebody that opens you up to something that you don't know, and vice versa, in the same conversation, you can open them up to something that they don't know, guess what happens? Magic. That's where the magic happens. The magic happens when you are courageous enough to, it's not just challenging what you know, to recognize that you don't know, and to be open to exploring what you don't know. You're essentially admitting that you don't know, and that's scary. Oh my gosh, I should have all the answers, shouldn't I? Right? If I'm the expert in shoemaking, if I'm Nike, I should have all the answers about how to make the greatest shoe. But it takes someone with real vulnerability to say, you know what? There's more information, there's more wisdom out there. No matter how much wisdom we have in here, there's more wisdom out there. Why has every great company at some point fallen? Every great company. AOL, I don't know if they were a great company, right? But using an example, right? AOL had everything. I always joke about this, right? We got those CDs in the mail.
Blockbuster instead.
For Blockbuster. Oh yeah, Blockbuster. Good example, Blockbuster. Great example. Blockbuster. You wanted a movie, you went to Blockbuster, right? What else was there? Was there a competition to Blockbuster? Maybe regionally. I remember in Pittsburgh there was like another small video shop. But Blockbuster was the Blockbuster, right? That was the place to go. You went to and you were looking, and you would look at all the videos, and you look back at that, and why was that ever? How did that ever make sense? And what the problem is, Blockbuster had a model, and they believed in the model. And when What's his name? The head of Netflix. What's his name? His name is TH. What's his name? Something. Yeah, no, when he came to Blockbuster and pitched his idea, famously, Blockbuster ran him out of the room. They weren't open to a radically different business model. So what happens is, if you stay locked into your way of thinking, that's great for as long as that lasts. But you know what? Someone else who's thinking outside the box is going to come up with a new idea that's at some point that will be better than your idea. If you're open to that, read Hastings. There you go. I thought it was with a T, like Tim.
But there will be a company to come along to Amazon.
100%. And what about Google? Google is now petrified because of AI. Yeah, being with ChatGPT. Huh? If any company, I'm just going to say, if any company thinks that they're so big that that no other company will ever innovate greater than themselves, that's the first sign that they will be outgunned. 100%. If you think, doesn't matter if it's an individual or a company, if you think that you have the answers, that you have all the answers, you're done. That's the first sign that you're staying locked in. The hubris will necessarily prevent you from exploring outside the box. And because of that, you know what's going to happen? Someone else is going to have a conversation with somebody in a coffee shop, right? Or in a chat room somewhere, and come up with a great idea. And the next thing you know, you're wondering, how do we miss that? And you know how you missed that? You missed that because you were locked in, and it might have been genius. You might have had the greatest idea in 2001. It might have been the most innovative idea ever in history of mankind in 2001. My friends, it's 2023. Life doesn't stop because you had a great idea 22 years ago. Life doesn't stop at that point. Life continues to evolve. If a person, if a company, it doesn't make a difference who it is. If you're not open, if you're not curious, if you're not constantly on the hunt, collaborating with others outside of your expertise to see what they can bring to the table, then if necessarily, it's not like maybe someone's going to take it is a guarantee that someone else is going to come up with something that is greater than your idea and will absolutely tank you. And it's happened in every industry. It's happened every time. It's happened to every civilization. Name me one civilization, great civilization, that's lasted forever. Never happened. Never happened. The Roman Empire, no civilization lasted forever.
Unless they were good for the Jews.
Even then, which civilization lasted forever? No great civilization has lasted forever. And it always comes down to the same thing. They fought for something. They had a great idea. People got together. They banded together. They created their nation. They had their purpose and their mission. And then the Manta Avisa Kasisa, as Moshe Rabbeinu, as Moses says, the end of the Torah. They became lazy. They took things for granted. We have a great country. It is what it is. And then next thing you know, there's fighting on the inside to the point that the inside gets destroyed and it becomes hollowed out. And then all it takes is a little flick on the outside. The whole thing crumbles. Every great civilization in history has the same end story. It's the same end story. We've never been locked into, I mean, there's a few things. We've never been locked into a space, a physical space. Obviously Israel, right? Obviously. But notwithstanding that, Judaism has never been dependent on a physical space. And Judaism has always been predicated on Torah, not on us getting together and etc. It's always been based on something that is an objective thing. I don't know if I'm doing justice to answering your question, but I will say when we built the civilization, that also crumbled. I'm saying when we built you with me on this? First temple was destroyed. Second temple was destroyed. We were exiled, right? For many years. We've been exiled for many years. So I'm saying on a physical level, that's the way it is. Everything crumbles. Everything crumbles. And the reason it crumbles is usually because of the internal stuff. It's not the external stuff, it's the internal stuff. What I mean to say in this case, same thing with creativity. The lack of creativity it's not because someone had a greater idea than you. That's the way it is on the surface. What's the source of that? Why did they have a greater idea than you? Because you stopped thinking, because you began to think that you know everything. That's why somebody has a greater idea than you. The moment you believe that you have all the answers is the moment you're on that ship and you're going to ride it down to the bottom. That's it.
Except if you put Judaism aside and you look at the major three religions today, Christianity, I mean, they're growing, I mean, not Christianity, but also growing with them down, but then other religions. Now it's all up to 2,000 years.
Right.
And there is no, like, you can see them anywhere humbling. I mean, maybe they have their internal issues, but humbling.
All things are dynamic for you. What you're saying, you're based on the Torah. The Torah cannot be done anything.
Right.
Because it is.
Right. How does that explain Islam and its growth? I don't know. We would have to look at that. Do you have?
Because I think you're talking about something when you mentioned space. I think there's something different between ideas that can live in the abstract and within people versus a physical space. Like there's so many Muslim empires that have crumbled. Like that's why your point of maybe society, state. Like I'm not sure like what word we need to use, but the physical thing always crumbles at some point. That ideas can last for that could potentially be eternal.
Yeah, but I think maybe your question is, well, how come no one's come up with another idea for another religion that is? I don't know. I don't know that I've thought about that in that context. I think you're asking a good question. I don't know that I've thought about it, and I mean we could think about it and discuss it. I don't know. I would like to spend some time thinking about that and how that fits into this paradigm. There have been, right? Right. So that's which one? Oh, Scientology. Yeah. Yeah, that's new. Yeah.
Now, Kabbalah's wanting to be its own religion.
There you go.
You know,
Hold on. Bagelology?
What?
No, just
But think about it. Yes, you
right. Yeah. He was a nice Jewish boy. Whatever. Like next thing you know. By the way, that's where all this comes from. All the anti-Semitism, because like their God is a Jew. Like, Jews.
Talks about follow the science.
Yeah.
The science, because the science is the science and it never lets you down.
Right.
Science is so completely different now than it was 100 years ago.
100%.
The only thing I realize every time they say follow the science, in reality, oh God, this is going to sound like a commercial. If you really follow that, like you're saying, that's what made me think about it, is the Torah. Is the
Right.
only thing that doesn't change.
Torah's unchanging. It's like classic Coke. The formula doesn't change. Remember when they tried to roll out new Coke? That wasn't right, for sure. By the way, the point of science, right? There's not a knocking on science. The point of science is to change and evolve. The more we learn, the more we know. I gave a class Wednesday. We spoke about Aristotle and his theories on things. And remember Galileo? They didn't like Galileo. He was challenging long-held beliefs. Anyway, the point is.
Torah considers it round.
I don't know.
You know what I'm saying?
I don't know. You know what's cool? You know what's cool about in the high holiday prayers? I always love this line. It's Tola Eretz Abelima, which means God suspends the earth in empty space. I love that. I guess we had some sort of insider information that God, I mean, this liturgy dates back a long time. And it talks about how God suspends the earth in empty space. Anyway, the point is like this. Circling back to creativity. The point with creativity is, and we spoke about this last week a little bit, and we're again picking up this conversation because it's really important in our text. Creativity is born of looking outside of the box. It's about opening up the mind outside of what it already knows. And part of that is to really, sometimes it's about forcing yourself into a space that you're not comfortable with. Because as long as you're in that comfortable space, you're probably going to fall back on your comfort zones and on your patterns of thinking and on your typical way of doing things, which then it might be fine, but it might not be radically creative. Today, the topic is radical creativity. Radical creativity happens when we open the door, as it were, to another dimension. And that could happen, as we said last week, through meditation and through other forms of that. And it could also happen, as I'm suggesting today, through conversation with somebody in a different field, straight up in a different field, someone that's not in your circle, in your space. Have a conversation, discuss a problem, present it to someone that you think would never have the answer to that question. And you know what? They just might. They might have a completely different way. That's why you take a scientist and an artist and put them together. Scientists and artists working together. That sounds like a disaster. It sounds like a bad comedy, right? Film. What a scientist and an artist. That's how innovation happens. That's how innovation happens. Innovation happens when people feed off of each other. The greatest innovations in science and technology happened when people began operating outside of their specific clans and integrating with people. That's why you can chart. The greatest technological advancements, scientific advances happen when societies move from a very insular way, a clan-based system, to more open collaboration where people meet each other, have conversations, and whether it's documented or not, they have these conversations. The next thing you know, creative sparks are lit. And so what does this mean for us? Chachma, getting back to the chart here. Chachma, right? Top right. Chachma is wisdom, but it's really about creativity. Chachma is, if you switch around on the Hebrew side, if you look at the other side of the page, and I'll bring up the Hebrew side here online as well. Chachma, if you switch around the first two letters, instead of the ches and the chaf, it would be the chaf and the ches, and that spells the word koach. Koach means power. And then the last two letters are ma, which means what? Or why, like ma nishtana, right? Why is this not different? Chachma also means koach ma, which means the power of what? What is a question? I hope I'm not sounding way too vague here. When somebody says what, when someone starts a sentence with the word what, it means that they're about to ask a question. Koach ma, chachma, koach ma means the power, koach, of ma, of asking questions. Asking questions is the first step to creativity, because it's when you think you know everything that you don't ask questions. Questions, I have the answers. I ask questions. You come to me with your questions, I've got the answers. It's when a person is brave enough and honest enough and vulnerable enough to say, I don't have all the answers. And even though I figured everything in this box out, but there's so much that I haven't figured out, and I'm looking to ask questions, or even ask somebody, what are their questions? Not because I want to answer them, because I want to hear what other people are talking about. I want to hear what issues, what questions, what problems people are dealing with in other fields and other areas. That's when chachma happens. That's when the magic happens. That's when things expand and blow open in incredible ways. Chachma then is the process by which we ask the question, or we ask questions, and by the virtue of that process of asking questions, we open up our minds. We open up our view of reality and see something that we simply could not have seen inside our own heads. And I'm using that word "seen" specifically because I want to contrast it with Bina in a moment. Chachma is creative wisdom, but it's also about seeing something that you can't currently see. You're stuck. You're in your box. It doesn't feel like it's a box. It's a really big box. And you might think that where you are, you'll never get to the end of that box. And that might be true. It's still a box. It's still your space. Chachma means to open that door, to crack the door open, or to blow the door open so that you can now see outside into a different expanse. Chachma is the vision. The example that we've used many, many times, and it's straight from the teachings of Kabbalah, the example that's used is when you're in a dark place, and a lightning flash, right? I'm just thinking of like a zigzag, but it doesn't have to be a zigzag. It should just be a flash, illuminates the night sky. And for a moment, everything becomes visible and clear and seen. That's chachma. Chachma is the light bulb going off. It's the aha moment. But typically, the way it's described in Kabbalah, it's that aha moment that you haven't yet figured out. It's you've seen something, and you almost feel like, wow, I just got the answer. But if somebody asks you, wait, what's the aha? You won't be able to explain it yet. It's that sense that I just got something, like you just downloaded something, or you just got a vision of something, but you can't yet articulate it. And that's where Bina comes in. Bina is where you begin to articulate that vision that you just saw. So it's still creative. Understand this. Bina, we typically say that Bina is not creative, it's analytical, and that's partially true. Bina is analytical, it's analyzing what? The Chachma. So Bina is also new information. Bina is also dealing with new insight, but it's dealing with it in a way where it's breaking the things out into details. One of the differences, one of the ways that this distinction is framed in Kabbalah is the difference between seeing and hearing. What's the difference? When you see something, you see it instantly, right? So you look up, right? So in this room, right? I'm not going to describe it. When it's look up in this room and you'll see something on the ceiling, right? In fact, I'll show everybody here as well. Can I? Wait, hold on. I could turn it. You're saying I should do it normally. Okay, fine. Fine. All right, if you insist. All right, fine. Why not? So you guys see that on the ceiling? Yeah, look at that. Okay. So you see it. You look up and you see it. In one moment, in one instant, you see the entire array. If you describe it, I've been avoiding describing it. If you describe it, you would say, well, there are circular orbs. I know they're not balloons, or else we would probably blow them out of the sky at this point. That's a joke. There are these too soon, right? Too soon. We definitely don't want to mess with I don't know. Are these spy orbs? Anyway, so there are these, what would you call them? What are these? Are these lanterns? There's not lanterns.
Well, it reminds me of like the Chinese lantern that I think of.
Right, Chinese lanterns, right? Ooh, too soon also. But but these are somewhat, right? Colorful orbs. And you would say, and I would describe it as being colorful orbs that are hanging at different heights. And there's different colors. There's some that are yellow, some that are blue, some that are striped, one that's striped, some that have a blue background with some floral, I don't know what kind of flowers those are because I'm not a flower expert, but some sort of like flower print on it. Daisies? Nice. Some daisies on it. Now I sound very, very knowledgeable. And I would just, so imagine if you were never in this room, right? And I were to describe it, it would take me a while. I would fumble for words, just me personally, I would fumble for some of these words in describing it. And having never seen it, you would probably imagine something that does not look like this. You wouldn't. It wouldn't be exact. Like the image in your mind would not, 100% would not be this, exactly this. It might be close. It might be not close. There will be a range, depending on how well I describe it and how good your imagination is based on my description. But it's not going to be that you're not going to picture this in your head. You ever have this experience where you've heard somebody on the radio? Does radio still exist? You heard a podcast and podcast work, where you heard someone on a podcast for a long time, and then you meet them for the first time in person. You're like, oh, that's what you look like, right? Because you imagine, forget what they said, even the voice, you imagine something on the voice. Imagine something on the voice. That doesn't make sense. You imagine what they look, their appearance based on their voice, and then you see them. You're like, oh, that's totally not you. I had this experience with my kid's orthodontist. They started going to the orthodontist in 2020 or 21, right? So my the kid's doctor, was always wearing a mask, but it wasn't like a huge mask. You could see like top of the head, pretty much. Like I had an image. If you would ask me, do I know what the doctor looks like? 100 without a mask, 100%. One day, show up, he's not wearing a mask. I'm like, who is that guy? It wasn't that much. It wasn't that much space, and yet when you see it, you got it. But when you hear it, when you describe verbal communication, it takes longer, it's linear, and it's not going to be 100% precise. But the difference is like this. Difference is when you see something, it's kind of locked into that. You've seen it, and that's you have it. Seeing is believing. You know it, you have it. It is what it is. But you're locked into that space. But when you describe something, then you get into the process of articulating it, and then you can expand on it and elaborate and say, you know what, these orbs that are hanging on the ceiling are part of an overall, theoretically, feng shui in the room, right? And part of the overall design, and the reason behind the design, you can start pontificating and explaining the reason for the orbs. Right. Bina is where things get elaborated and expanded. So Chachma is your mind opens, you see something, and then the door closes like an elevator. Right? It opens and it closes. Right? Imagine you're standing outside the elevator. It opens, you see a group of people, it closes. It opens again, a different group of people. Chachma is you're seeing a portal into another side, into another reality. Right? The door's open, you see something, and then immediately it closes. Bina is where your mind starts narrating what it saw to yourself, and you figure it out. And through that narration process, there is a subjectivity where you are expanding and applying and figuring it out. And that's why two people can see the same thing and come away with different narratives about it, because the narrative happens in Bina. Chachma is the vision, Bina is the narrative. But nonetheless, I want to be clear here. Bina is the narrative of Chachma. So Chachma, and this is something that we're gonna emphasize today. Chachma is always about. Chachma will always draw you back to that initial vision, to that singular point of vision when you saw what you saw. Whereas Bina will draw you into the details of what you saw. Your details of extrapolating what you saw. So Chachma. So, for example, when you are reading something, and you finish reading a chapter of something, and you're in your mind, you're thinking to yourself, okay, what's the summary of what I just read? And in your own head, you're trying to get a sikum, right? You're trying to summarize. Bottom line. That's your chachma part of your brain. No, you're not coming up with a new insight, a new flash of insight, but chachma always is trying to pull it back to a singular point. Right? Chachma is always trying to pull you back into the original singular point of the idea. What's the bottom line? That's a chachma approach intellectually. The Bina approach is about getting into the details. Bina approach is breaking down all the details and applying it and expanding it and discussing it and elaborating on it. Bina is about the details, the broader array. Chachma is about bringing it back to the singular point of focus. Yes.
Don't
Sure.
be annoyed by this question.
I will not be annoyed.
Don't throw me out of the class.
I will not throw it out of the class.
Who says?
Who says what?
All of it. Who says?
Kabbalah. Who says Kabbalah? Oh,
That's what I'm
What-
talking about.
what
Who
is
says?
what is Kabbalah? Kabbalah means received. This is received wisdom. We're actually going to be speaking about it this week in our final lesson of our class, Booksmart. We're going to be exploring the origins of Kabbalah and Hasidism, who wrote the books, where did they get the wisdom from, etc. So come back to me after Wednesday, or come Wednesday, and I'll give you the full scoop. No, but in general, Kabbalah means received wisdom. It's spiritual wisdom that we believe was received by great tzaddikim, by great righteous individuals who had their antennas on their original cell phones, right? Notwithstanding the radiation, as we talked about before, their cell phone antennas open and extended and attuned to higher realities. This is what the great mystics tell us.
And then they share it.
And then they shared it, yeah, and now we're receiving it, and in turn sharing it and receiving it. So Chachma, again, Chachma is creativity, it's vision, it's seeing things, it's in Nekuda Achat. It's 1 point. When I say 1 point, you're seeing a nice array of balloon, of hanging orbs here. There's many of them, but you're seeing it as 1 point with one look, Beskira Achat, with one glance, you see the whole thing. Whereas hearing, verbalizing, articulating is a process by which it's linear and it's detailed and it's blown out into many different parts. And that's all fine. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that, right? When I say there's nothing wrong with that, what I mean is, by the way, that was Saul Dreyer, the aforementioned Holocaust survivor band leader. I will call him right back after the class in a few minutes. Yes, no worries. Oh,
I didn't
all right.
know, I just got the call.
No worries. Okay, we'll see you.
No,
Yes, you go.
just as long as it's not for any of us.
It's what?
As long as it's not for any of us.
We're still here. We're still here. Zagazun, only to good health. Yeah.
Saying in Torah that Israel saw,
Yes,
they saw the war.
good.
Were they in a state of chokmah at that point? They were just
Yes.
in the receiving-
They were in a receiving
one-
state
one phase.
when the Jews stood at Sinai. The Jewish people stood at Sinai. And it says that they saw
Voices.
Ro'im et hakolot. They saw the sounds. Exactly. They saw the sounds means that all of the stuff that would be kind of a linear process, they saw it all at once, and they saw it in a way that was true. The other explanation of this, the way it's brought down in Chassidut also, is that just like when it comes to seeing and hearing, so seeing is believing, whereas hearing is, maybe, right? So typically the physical stuff is what we see and therefore believe. Like, I know that this is here because I see it. God, I believe. I mean, I'm pretty sure the books talk about God. I'm pretty sure I felt something before, but I can't say that it's as real as this. At Sinai, they saw what they normally heard. What normally is a rumor, i.e. spirituality, they saw with clarity. But you're right, and seeing it means there's that, the power of seeing is that it is all at once, which means that it's all clear. It doesn't require an explanation. If you see something and somebody has to tell you what you saw, then you didn't see it. Seeing means it's clear, and it's clear instantly. It's obvious. It's obvious that this is here, that this cup is here. It's obvious. You see it, it's here. Somebody tells you, well, this and that or the other, and you didn't see it. So at Sinai, we saw it, meaning it was absolutely clear. So seeing, chachma, which is seeing, is always about going back to the clarity of the original point, going back to the way it's described in Kabbalah is as a nukudah, as a point, as opposed to a line which is expanded, right? You first start with a point and then you expand it. So you have chachma, you take your pen, right? You take a pen and begin writing. So the first thing is you put it down on the paper. That's the point. And then you write. So imagine you see something and then you begin to write it, to write a letter, to write a story about it. You saw something or you had an experience and now you're going to write about it. The first point is you saw something. That it's almost like that first dot, that first point captures the fact that the whole thing that you saw. Now you're going to begin to write it out and elaborate. It's going to take you 10 pages of writing to describe what you saw, which is symbolized, not literally, but symbolized conceptually, at least the way Kabbalah symbolizes it, in that first point when you put the pen down on the paper. That's like what you saw itself, and now you're going to write it out. It's like when you speak to a child about a thing that you have certainty about. So you have clarity on this, but then you have to explain it. So now when you explain it, you give arguments, rationales, explanations, which is a more elaborate process. But the truth of it is, and a kudah point, it's clear to you. You see it. It's obvious to you. You have that clarity. That's chachma. So chachma is not only creativity, but using another C word, it's not just creativity, it's also clarity. Whereas bina is not just comprehension and analysis, it is a little less clarity because you have a lot more details now. You have a lot more weeds. You have a lot more details and particulars and components that you could get lost in the components. It's like, I'll just bring you into my head. So whenever I teach a class, I always know in my head, at least, I don't know if it comes out, I know in my head, what's the point? What's the point? What's the point of the class? And then there's a nice journey along the way. There's many ideas that are developed and stories and jokes and bad jokes. Sometimes once in a while we hit a good joke, right? Reflections, there's questions and discussions. There's a lot of stuff. There are a lot of details along the way. But part of my process, at least internally, is I know the point, the bottom line point of the class. And my goal is that by the end of the class, not only are all the details communicated, but that there's clarity about the point. The point would be chachma, and all of the other stuff, which is critical to learning, is all the bina of the class. So you have a lot of bina. Most of the class is bina. But within the bina, there's chachma, there's the point. You might call that the aha moment or the takeaway, whatever you want to call it. The nekuda, the point of the class.
Like it's very hard to sustain the chokmah without the bina.
You wouldn't understand the chachma without the bina.
They got it in Har Sinai, they saw the chokmah, but without the bina, the bina that will wear off after. and you
Right.
See a miracle, or you see something that makes you a believer, and if you don't follow it up with something,
I would say,
Even that wears off.
absolutely, but you have more than.
Yeah.
50. But if you continue with the Bina all the time, then you will sustain the Chokhmah one and more.
right, easy come, easy go. It's almost like you had a vision of something, but then
Like
even-
miracles also only hold believers to a certain amount of time, if they don't follow it up with something.
think about it. How long did that Sinai experience last? Until the golden calf, until 40 days. And then they were creating a golden calf and worshiping it. After they heard, or after they experienced, they saw whatever, 40 days prior, God say, I am the Lord your God. Don't have any other gods. Don't worship other gods. Next thing you know, they're doing Hava Nagila around the golden calf.
Better than Israel.
Well, because we're at the end of a multi-thousand-year process of Bina, of exploring it and elaborating upon it, and you know, that whole process is a very detailed process. You know, it's interesting. I think that the example that you're giving is a very powerful one. Faith. A person can experience something that makes them a believer. When I say makes them a believer, that really like, wow, I can't explain that other than God is real. Whatever that moment is, it doesn't matter what that moment is. But unless that's followed up with something, what's going to happen with that? You need the Bina to the Chachma. But the Chachma will always be your, to use modern language, your North Star. Is that what the kids, is that what they say today? The North Star. It will always be the guiding light. And it was the point that all the Bina is meant to focus back on. Because the Chachma is holding you true to that core. That's the core of all of the stuff. Otherwise, you get very, very quickly lost in all of the weeds. You get lost in all of the Bina elaboration. The Chachma, Chachma keeps you aligned with the point and the truth. You need the Bina, you need the Chachma, and there's a powerful interplay between the two. Jeff, what do you want?
Could you keep the premise that reminded me of that proof that God exists based upon the amount of Jews that were at Har Sinai and then.
Yeah. There's
I've heard that before, and there's a very compelling argument that I could never make properly.
Yeah. Well, there's an argument that's made that, you know, one or every other religion is based on the experience of one or maybe two or three people. And the idea is, if somebody were, not suggesting anybody has lied about this stuff, but if somebody were, it would be easier to pull off if it's one person. Somebody says, I saw something. So either you trust them or you don't trust them. But if you trust them, there's no one fact checking at that point, because it's just trusting them. If it's two people, so then the concern is that one of them will eventually say, you know what, we made this up. But if they both hold strong, three people, it's like anything. You more people you bring into the conspiracy, it's harder to maintain. However, try to bring in 3 million people into a conspiracy. How long, especially Jews, right? How long is that going to last? That's the argument. The argument is, how would you get so many millions of people on the same page with the same lie? No one would ever, and no one broke that line. I mean, and the proof is in the pudding. No one else that's ever claimed something has ever claimed that it's a few million people. It's never happened. Now, if you want to be, one way to say it is that, well, God never again revealed himself to so many billions of people, and that may be true. Or you could say that no one ever pulled off a conspiracy trying to pull in so many people at the same time.
Only the Jewish people can come up with that.
Only the Jewish people could pull off that type of conspiracy. Exactly. But Keller,
There were two beggars, I have to interrupt. There
Yeah.
were two beggars on the street of Rome. One sitting in front of a Jewish star, one sitting in front of a cross with the poles in front of them.
Yeah.
right? Everyone's giving money to the guy with the cross. Nobody's throwing any money into the Jew. So a priest comes by and he says to Moshe, he says, I gotta tell you, we're in Rome. This is a city of Catholics. They're not gonna, maybe if you convert to Catholicism, maybe you would raise some money. And the priest walks off and the guy turns and says, Moshe, look who's trying to tell the Jews how to do marketing.
exactly.
Yeah.
They're all in on it. Reminds me of the other joke where the two Jews are walking by And they walk down the street, they pass by a church, and the church says, convert today and get $1,000. So Moshe says to Yankel, he says, look, I'm hard on cash. I could use $1,000. I'm going to go in for a few minutes and just wait for me. Anyway, it takes him an hour and a half before he comes out. He comes out. So Yankel says to Moshe, knew how to go. Says, it went great. I learned a lot and I converted. He says to him, well, did you get the money? He's like, you Jews, all you think about is money. Anyway, it's a bad joke. Anyway, what's the point?
Jews have to tell that to you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It's a safe space. All right. Bottom line. Yes, also. All right. So here's the point. The point of all this is that when you think about Chachma and Bina, Chachma is the vision, Bina is the elaboration. So Chachma is like the first two tribes, Reuven and Shimon. Right? Reuven is Ru'u, seeing, and Shimon is like Shema, is listening. Seeing and listening. So seeing is instant, and listening is linear. Seeing is listening is an expanded experience. 1 point, a second point, a third point. It's broken out like that. Chachma is always about the point, the original point, the core nakudah, the core point, and Bina is all about all the details. So with mind, we're going to jump inside and read. This is page 46 of our text. Let's pass this around, please. Page 46. Again, I'm giving you one copy. I don't know why. 46. My favorite is when you're at a Shabbat dinner or Shabbat lunch, and you pass around the dessert. So you give the dessert to the person next to you, and then it goes all the way around back over here, and you're like, okay, I guess we're going to do it that way. Just keep the dessert when I give it to you and pass it down. Anyway, back to this. We're going to jump inside and read our text. Okay, here we go. 46, where it says ayin and yesh. Top of 4. Oh, it's hard to see the 46. You can find the 46 on the Hebrew side. The last page. This is it. This is the grand conclusion, which we'll speak about soon. Okay, ayin and yesh. This, let's jump in. This additional understanding. We talked about how when we're open to knowing, when we're open to understanding, we get additional insight. This additional understanding is referred to as additional Bina, understanding Bina specifically, because Bina is the power of revelation, as in the difference between Chachma and Bina. Chachma is ayin, nothingness, and Bina is yesh, being. So let me explain what he's saying here. Chachma, we've described up until now, Chachma is creativity. However, Chachma is seeing the thing as it is. And at that point, when your mind sees it, it's that aha moment, as I mentioned before, that aha moment, you don't have it figured out yet. You've seen it, and you get a sense of, oh, I got the answer. But what the answer is, can you articulate at that point? Not yet. Till you work it through and actually in your own head articulate it, and then you can articulate it to others. So the difference between Chachma and Bina is that Chachma is ayin. You've seen the beyond. You've touched the wisdom that's beyond your wisdom, but it's still ethereal. It's still not tangible at that point. Whereas Bina, once you've analyzed it and figured it out and broken it down into all the pieces of the idea, Bina's yesh, ayin and yesh. Ayin means nothing. Bina, yesh means something. So Chachma is still ethereal. You don't have the idea solid in your mind. Whereas, even though you've seen it, but it's still not solidified. Whereas Bina is now where you finally get it. That's where it's yesh. That's where it exists in a real state. In other words, let's continue reading. Although Chachma also constitutes a revelation, its revelation is merely an undefined point, the nakudah, the point, which is still considered concealment. In other words, you don't yet fully understand it yet at that point in the level of Chachma until you break it down in the realm of Bina. Furthermore, wherever the light of Chachma shines, and this I mentioned before as well, its function is to turn yesh into ayin, i.e. to create the absence of expansion. That is like when I'm teaching a class. My Chachma, so my Bina elaborates this point or the points over 90 minutes. My Chachma says, guys, right, Chavre, friends, what's the point? That's where Chachma comes in. Chachma says, after all is said and done, after all the rigmarole, after all After the entire show, what's the point? That's my chachma, saying, let's get back to the point. So Bina is always about expansion. All for a good cause. Both are for a good cause. It's about expansion. Chachma is about bring it back to the point, to the original point. Okay? Furthermore, I just read that. This is the idea of the saying, Chacham bevina. That's an interesting phrase. Chacham bevina. Be wise in understanding. Chacham means chachma. Bevina in bina. Even when you're in a bina mode of expansion, don't forget about the chachma. Don't forget about chacham. When you're giving, when you're sharing information in a lot of pieces, make sure that the listener, make sure that the student understands what the point of all of the above is. What's the nekudah? That's chacham bevina. Be wise in understanding, meaning that even bina's condition of articulation and multifaceted comprehension ought to be in a state of ayin and concealment, which means all should be reduced to one point, the quintessential point. Again, the easiest example I can give. Let's say you're brought in as a substitute teacher in a school, and now you're charged with giving a lesson, a 60-minute lesson to fifth graders, whatever topic it is. You need a plan. You're going to walk into the room and do what? You're going to teach something. What are you teaching? So hopefully in your head, you have a clarity of what you're going to. I'm going to teach this point. I'm going to teach this idea or this formula or this scientific principle. I'm going to teach this. How am I going to teach it? Well, I'm going to start off with the history, and then we're going to go into experiments, and then we're going to go into this and that. I'm going to demonstrate it and prove it and have the children ask questions, and then they're going to own the learning, and you have this whole idea about how you're going to teach it over an hour. But what are you teaching? This is the point. You start off with the point, and hopefully you end with the point. And in the middle, there's a lot of expansion. There's a lot of details, but hopefully it gets distilled back into the point of why you were teaching and what you were teaching that day. So that's what he's saying. He's saying chachma always trends back to that original point of vision, that clarity. That's what chachma is. Chachma always moves back to that original point. Bina is all about expansion. In light, she used the example of light. Chachma is, remember the mag lights? Remember the mag light flashlights? Where it had the adjustable beam? So you can make it wider or you make it more narrower. What's the difference? Wider is great because it illuminates a wider area, but it doesn't go as far. Whereas when you make it narrower, it goes, it's more singular focus, but it goes, hits the tree that's 100 yards away or whatever it is, theoretically. I don't know. So the same things. Chachma is narrowly focused. What's the point? Bina is wide dissipation. It distributes wide, but it's not as narrowly focused, which means that the children could sit in that class. If you don't do chacham bevina, you know what that means? After 60 minutes, the kids will learn a lot of information, but when they get home and they're asked, so what'd you learn today? Like, no idea. Right? It's like what happens sometimes with a sermon, right? You hear like a lot of ideas and then I don't know, like what's the point? Right. I don't know, but it was really good. The point that, so and there's no magical answer for this, there's no magical solution for that. But part of the process is always bringing it back to the chachma, always, because Bina is the expansion. Bina is why it takes 20 minutes or 60 minutes or 90 minutes. All that is Bina. Bina is expansion. But what are you expanding on? A nakuda, a point. That's chachma. Chachma is the point, Bina is the expansion. And it's always like that. Chachma always, the energy of chachma in your head, even when you're in a modality of Bina, because you're teaching and you're expanding, the chachma in your own head is like, don't forget to bring it back to the point. Don't forget to show how all of that goes back to the same point, right? There's a point here. It's like you wrote a book. It's 400 pages. There's a point. What's the point of the book? That you could write 400 pages of prose? What's the point of the book? There's a point. There's an akuda. I've told the story many times. Steven Spielberg, his mother opened up a shul in Los Angeles, opened up a synagogue dedicated to her late husband. And Steven Spielberg was there at the opening of the synagogue, and yeah, she has a kosher restaurant. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And it's called Bernie's Place, I think. I think that was his name. It's No, is that the restaurant? No, that's the, I don't know, whatever it is. Oh, that was weekend at Bernie's. No, I'm kidding. All right, no, I know. So the original is always better. So here's the deal. So just very quickly, because again, there's a point here. You see what's going on here? There's a reason why I'm telling this story. The point is, story is going to take a little bit with some jokes along the way, but there is a point. Chachma Bina. So there were some Chabad yeshiva students there from the yeshiva in Los Angeles that came to the celebration for the new synagogue being opened, and a few of them were little Steven Spielberg's there. It's like he's a big deal. So they asked him, "Tell us something about filmmaking." So he said, "I want to tell you a secret that not many people know, unless you're in the industry, and that is that that every movie, if it's a good movie, there's one point. It might be one scene or one line of dialogue, but there's like one point for why the movie was made. Like there's one idea that the movie is conveying. It's not like 4 ideas. There's like one idea, one core idea that drives the whole film. It's like, how do you know what it is? Listen to the music. The music is there's always music or sound playing. But right before that one line is uttered that captures the entirety of the movie, the music stops. And that line is uttered in just with a background of silence. That's at least maybe that's his films, but that's what you know how you know what the point of the whole movie is. The line that's uttered with the absence of sound. My point of all this is you make a 90-minute film or a 2-hour film or 2.5 hours, or Avatar's 3.5 hours. I'm kidding, I don't know, but like very long film. The next thing you know, you have a lot of Bina. There's a lot of details, a lot of scenes, a lot of characters, a lot of plot, a lot of ups and downs and this and that or the other. But there's a point. There's a singular point, and a good movie will ensure that the viewer, the watcher, at the end of the day, at the end of the movie, gets the point. A good book, you'll get the point. If it's not done so well, you come out of it, you're like, a lot of stuff happened. What was it about? Well, there was a guy and a girl, and they met, and it's like it was all over the place. That's when Bina got a little distracted. Chachma brings it back to the point. Bina is, by definition, it's not a bad thing, it's not a judgment, but Bina is details. Chachma is point. Okay, back inside. Let's finish this off. Back inside, because I want to make sure we don't lose the point here of what we're doing. Okay, so let's continue. So the main revelation, Milky Way. Nice. What was the shul? I think it's called Bernie's place. I think it's called.
The second husband was Bernie Adler.
Did he pass away also?
He's still alive. She passed away in 2017.
Oh, I didn't know that. No. All right.
Still operating.
Milky Way. Yeah, I remember Milky Way was like all right. So the main revelation, he says, of the idea, the revelation of the idea, not the core of the idea, but where that happens, of course, in Bina. That main revelation, the expansion of the idea occurs in Bina, which is the expansion of a concept to many details until the light is absorbed and understood well in your own head. It's where you break it down and understand it. It's disseminated into your own brain. This is the idea of Havein b'chachma. The opposite of Chacham b'vina is Havein b'chachma, understand and wisdom, meaning that the power of Bina affects a revelation, even in the kernel of Chachma, which transcends revelation. In other words, the power of Bina is even when you have Chachma, which is a singular point, it can break down that point and make it understood to you, and then you can explain it to others. For the natural capacity of Chachma, once again, we're stating this, is to remain in a state of ayin, which is nothingness, which is an unrevealed state, and concealment, and not to enter a state of actual revelation. Thus, the power of Bina causes Chachma to act against its nature and enter a state of revelation. So that's what Bina does. Bina breaks things down, opens things up, makes things understood. Conclusion, last paragraph for all the Binas. All right. This, he says, is also the idea of additional Bina was granted a woman. In other words, the feminine energy lends itself or is attuned to Bina Yetera, additional extra Bina, referring to speech, which strongly possesses the power of Bina. Think about it. The difference between vision and articulation, as I said before, is the difference between Chachma and Bina. Chachma is the point. It's the Nakuda. It's one moment. It's all included in one space. That's the point, and that's Chachma. And then you have the elaboration, which is Bina, which is speech, And that is more of a feminine energy, not the speech part necessarily, but the idea of expansion and development. Think about it biologically, just very quickly, biologically, in the creation of human life. Think about the role of the male and the role of the female. The role of the male is to provide the seed, as it were, right? The core. And what's the role of the female, of the mother? To develop it, to expand. Or you take a tiny whatever, and the next thing you know, it's an embryo, and now it's right. Now you develop, and it expands and it develops with all the details of a human body, of human form. It has the power back inside. Bina has the power to elicit and reveal even the depth and essence of Chachma, which entirely transcends the level of revelation, meaning that on its own, it cannot be revealed only through speech, as explained above. So speech can reveal the unrevealable. It can open up that which can't be opened up on its own. This is the idea of the additional Bina that speech possesses. And this is how this particular discourse concludes. So this is a very, no puns intended, this very seminal moment, because what we're doing is, right? What we're doing is we've just concluded this discourse, which is the first of a series of discourses. So lest you think, oh, then what else are we going to do in subsequent Sundays? This is the first of a series of discourses. In this book, the first 3 are published together. So the plan is to continue with the next. It's a bit serialized, right? The plan is to continue with the next discourse next week, and just kind of to bring things back into focus of what we've done over the last several months. Over the last, we started when? We started in Elul. So Elul, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Tevet, Shvat. Yeah, that's 6 months. Almost exactly 6 months. What we've done over the last 6 months or so. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So I can teach you what?
I'll 100%.
And sell.
Absolutely.
Sell rich strings for $25.
Yes.
Good.
Yes. But you can't market it as wrapped around the tomb of Rachel if it wasn't. But you can definitely sell red string. You can definitely sell red string. All right. So what we've done over the last 6 months or so is we've explored a lot of Kabbalistic ideas explaining the power of essentially the cup, the recipient. You have things. I will call him back very soon. All right. You have, he's excited about coming to Atlanta. You have the cup, which seems to be a passive recipient. It's like Bina. Chachma is the big idea, is the creative idea. Bina is just, Chachma goes into Bina. Because there's power in Bina. Bina expands it. And yes, obviously it comes from Chachma, that's a source of creativity, etc. But it's in the Bina process of expansion that, some more ideas come to light also. More ideas, and it's broken down and it becomes usable, etc. So there's a power to the cup, there's a power to speech. You have an idea in your head, and then you articulate it to someone else. There's power in that experience, there's power in the feminine energy, in the creation of human life. There's power in the earth to create vegetation and growth, and all of this is we're studying all of this because the initial point of all of this is that when it comes to our relationship with God, God is the giver and we are the recipient. Lest we think that our role in life is passive, God does all the doing and we're just the recipients of life and blessing. The point of all of this is that the recipient actually brings something to the table that doesn't even exist in the source. And that is not heretical. It's not like a statement of heresy to say that we can do something that God can't. That's not heresy, even though it's true. We can do something that God can't. You know what God can't do? God can't create a space that is holy and that is spiritual, that was chosen by creation itself. God can't create that. You with me? God can't force our opting in, because if he forced that, then we didn't opt in. God can create heaven. That was the way Kabbalah explains that was love. When he held that mountain over us at Sinai, it wasn't a real mountain. It was love. God showed so much love. He saved us. Imagine you find someone in a very, very bad place and you rescue them, and then you set them up on a path for life. And then you tell them how much you love them. what are they going to say? I don't love you? Of course they're going to say that. Is it really them? That's why it says, Mikan Moda Rabba La Right. It says in the Talmud. This became a very big caveat in the whole relationship with God. Because although we said yes to the dress at Sinai, as it were, although we said yes, but it's because God did so much for us. The time of Purim, which is coming up, the holiday is coming up in a few weeks, it was at the times of Purim, when things were not going so well, and the Jewish people still stayed with God. That's when it was clear that it's really something that we are choosing. When everything's going well, when you're being wined and dined, you're being flown to Paris for the day to eat in a restaurant and then whisked back in a private jet, when that's the experience, it's easy to say, I love you. But do you really love them, or is it because of all of the stuff? But it's when things are not going so well and you still stick with the person, that's when you know that you're really committed to them. That's why early love is easy, because it's like everything's amazing. It's new, it's fresh, it's amazing. When things it's when time goes on and things get a little stickier, that's when the real question is, so do you really love them? Do you love them when they're not giving you everything, when they're not, showing their best self, etc. Right? That's the that's fourth is the charm. So that's when
Before number 2.
we can talk about this other context. But anyway, the point is like this.
Very valuable.
The point is God can't create our consent. Because if he did, it wouldn't be our consent. God can't create. God wants the one thing that he can't have. Sorry, that he can't force, which is a relationship that's not forced. God can create heaven and put angels in and program them to say Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. He can create a space where there's spiritual light, create beings that are sensitive to the light, that when they see that light or experience that light, they are awed out of their minds and say, holy, 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 God is amazing. And he has that, and he created that. But how enjoyable is if you create a bot that says, I love you? That's what it is. It's a program that says, I love you. I've talked about this many times. It's like you program an app to send you a text message at 12 noon that says, thinking about you, love you, hope you're having a great day. And then you receive it. Now what? How good does that feel? What feels good is when it's someone who has their own mind, their own heart, their own issues, their own challenges, their own successes, their own failures, and their own life and their own deadlines. And they chose in the middle of the day to take a few minutes, think about you, and write you a nice note. That means something. That's meaningful. That's the one thing God wants. Everything else he can force. It's the one thing he wants. And so when we do that for him, we give him something. We are the cup. We're the recipient. In this relationship, we are definitely the recipient. God created us. But what we've learned over these last 6 months is that don't downplay the value of a cup. Don't overlook. This is where we get chachma and bina. 6 months of bina. Now I'm trying to bring it back, just the process, trying to bring it back to the point of what we've discussed. That although God is definitely the giver in this relationship and we're the receiver, there's something the receiver can give to the giver that the giver can't even give to him or herself. And that is, in every case is different, but in our relationship with God, it's giving God the sense of joy, of love, of connection that is born of a human being possessing free choice, living in we are living in a material world. And I am a material rabbi, right? We're living in a material world. God, right? Yeah, avoided that, right? Dodge that bullet. The point is, we are living in a physical space, and in that space, to still choose God, even though we have 1,000 things, right? The new Netflix series that just launched, I don't know what I'm just saying, right? Conceptually, and we still come to a Torah class, we still come to study Kabbalah. That's the one thing God can't make. That's the one thing that comes from us. God can set it up, but he also set up the challenge precisely to allow us to choose him, to choose that relationship. That's where the cup adds to the core, to the source. That's where Bina adds to Chachma. That's where speech adds to the idea. That's where the feminine adds to the masculine. Bottom line is Chachami sheyodea latzeit mitzara. Nice. Yeah. Good. Bottom line is that you and I have a tremendous gift and a tremendous, therefore, a tremendous privilege. And with great power comes great responsibility. We have the ability to literally choose or deny our relationship with Hashem. And so let us recognize the importance that God places in us in this relationship, and let us be good custodians of this great gift of free choice that we have been granted, recognizing that it's intended to be used to choose a relationship with God, although we could do whatever we want with it, but let's wield this power wisely. Thank you very much for joining me for Kabbalah Cafe. We're back on next week. I know we came to an end of a page, but don't let that throw you off. There's more where that came from. Same bad time, same bat channel, with a hot breakfast and more bagels and way more Kabbalah. By the way, the next discourse, if you Kabbalistically speaking, it is wild. It's a trip like that's unprecedented. So join us next week as we continue our Kabbalah series.
Thank you very much. What a beautiful class. I think that you have to teach in the university, like in the design department, art department. It will be amazing for the students.
I'm happy to teach a little bit of Kabbalah of creativity, but I don't know if I can teach. I think the collaboration would be interesting.
Yeah, it's
a little
amazing.
Kabbalah into design.
Yeah, no, it's like a collaboration, because it's so clear what is creativity. And I teach for a long time in the university, and really never have a class like this. I always say to the students that what I'm teaching sometimes about creativity and about what is Chokhmah and Bina, I put like normal names, I learn with you. It's amazing, really. Kol hakavod.
Thank you. And Mariana, you are a true artist and a true creative mind. So continue to do what you're doing. And I know we've had many conversations about the work that you're doing in many different areas. That's really life transforming. So kol hakavod to you, and keep on doing the good work.
Amen. Thank you.
All right. Sending best regards and lots of love to everybody. And to everybody, of course, Dr. Maxi and Ray and Andrea and Fran and Drar, Mariana and Dr. David, and EL. Who is EL?
Ellie will come.
Oh, yeah? Oh, maybe. Oh, nice. Yeah. Ellie, nice. Pleasure. It's great. Somebody who's a chacham knows how to get out of danger, and a navon knows how to not get into danger in the first place. That's a good, I like that. All right, we'll end with that. Shavua Tov, everybody, and Chodesh Tov. We have a Chodesh Adar coming up. Take care, everybody. See you guys.
Not to be too